Good morning.
Good
And
morning.
Good morning.
welcome to our very first online Together in Transition. So very happy to see and hear everybody. It's been what feels like a very, very long time. So it was so great that we can get together and use the technology this morning. And like I was mentioning, Pastor Lanny said, if you do have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. How today's going to go is I'm going to spend a few minutes giving an update on our response to the coronavirus pandemic, some of the things that have been going on behind the scenes, as well as what you guys are seeing as well. And then I'm going to turn it over to Barry, and we will give a call process update. And then lastly, we're going to send it over to Chad, and he's going to give us an update on the Growing Young book series that our group studied. And then at the very end, we'll open it up also for more Q&A so that we all have a chance to discuss and ask questions. So that's how this morning's session is going to go. And again, like I said, if you could type your questions in to the chat as you think of them, or hold them to the very end, and we will make sure we get to them this morning. So as I mentioned, I'm going to take a few minutes and just give us all an update on how we have been responding to the coronavirus. Team Jesus is definitely alive and well at Living Lord. There have been so many people who have just rolled up their sleeves and jumped in and helped us continue to take actions, even though we can't get together physically. So the first one is we've shifted to virtual church, and I know many of you have had the opportunity to take part in the virtual church and see those sermons both on Facebook or on YouTube.
Well, below the audio, it had video and audio.
And then the second was we've made the first round of member care calls, and the second round of those calls have begun. So trying to make sure everybody's connected, checking in with everybody, and making sure people are getting through the pandemic okay. The third thing is we've started a new rhythm of communications. Again, just making sure we're connected and everyone knows what's going on at the church. We started the bi-weekly e-Sun Times on email, and then a weekly Lifelines newsletter. And then we've also been doing more updating on Facebook and then updating our website online as well.
Started on the
So those are some of the new communication rhythms that we've done over the past few weeks. And as we're taking part in a go-to meeting today, we've done some work around digitally supporting our groups and our ministries and our youth and children. Chad moved to go-to-meeting for confirmation. Karen and Lindsay have been doing children's church using the online video. So really trying to shift being able to still connect. And I know several other small groups have used the go-to meeting as well. It just seems to be a great way to be able to see each other's faces and talk without being able to get together. The next thing I want to talk about is we have taken quite a few financial actions to at least slow down or reverse a little bit of the downward trend in the first quarter that we've seen. We're really working toward making sure we closely monitor our expenses and taking actions where we need to, as well as encouraging different ways for everyone to give, even though we can't pass the offering plate. So there's different ways for all of us to be able to give. But then we've also taken some actions to help us more with the cash flow and to be able to cover expenses. We applied and received the Paycheck Protection Program forgivable loan. So that is a new update for us. We did get approved for that. And then we also are applying for to Thrivent for being able to only do interest payments on the mortgage for the next 3 months. And we will have to pay the principal at the end of the mortgage. So we're not, it's just tacking it on at the end, but it will help us more with cash flow going forward for the next couple of months. And then very lastly, I feel like everybody has done such a great job of trying to keep ministries moving and going. And one example of that was our Oasis, supporting Oasis through donations over the last couple of weeks. The food pantries really needed some help, and Living Lord has definitely stepped in and was able to deliver for them during this time. And so I just want to say a quick thank you to Pastor Lanny, to Lewis, to Shane Barr, to Chad, to the entire staff, and then some very key volunteers who made phone calls or put together music, especially over Holy Week. There just been so many people who've stepped in. So special thank you to all of you. Couldn't have made all of this happen during this unprecedented time without all of your help and effort. So a huge thank you goes out to all of you. There were moments where things were shifting by the hour, and everybody was just so willing to step in, and it's very much appreciated. Going forward, we have begun some discussions for the reopening plan of Living Lord and what that may look like. We still have a lot of details to flesh out yet, and we will continue to monitor the state, county, and health department guidelines to make sure that we're following what they lay out. But we are going to work on what our plans may look like as we re-enter to be able to be together in person. We will be communicating those plans as they evolve, so be on the lookout for more to come. But they're in process, and I'm willing and happy to take questions. So if you have any questions regarding that, feel free to type them into the chat as well. Okay, so with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Barry to give you an update on our call process.
Hi, the call committee a couple weeks ago decided to take a break as the COVID
will now be recorded.
Information was beginning to be disseminated, and we completed our first round of interviews to make sure that we had a clear idea of where we were able to go based on all of the response to COVID. We were all switching to virtual church and things like that. Took a couple-week break, plus we had the Easter week, and everyone had a lot of activities going on, and especially trying to do Easter as a virtual celebration rather than the normal multiple church services. So we resumed meeting on the 13th of April, and just prior to the meeting that we had, I received a call that one of the candidates we had been considering decided that at this point they weren't comfortable with considering a call, that the activities revolving around the ministry really took precedence over any kind of consideration of future activities. So we're moving forward with one candidate at this point, and we've talked with that candidate and reaffirmed their interest in Living Lord moving forward. The next step we're going to do is an additional video conference. At this point, we would consider doing in-person interview, but because of the travel restrictions and the stay-at-home orders and things like that, it makes that very difficult. We feel as a committee that we really need to have a face-to-face meeting with a candidate prior to making any recommendation to the council. And so that's kind of our current things to do video conference, feel, you know, where do we candidate we're considering. Like Pastor Dave's letter with the Senate about additional candidates, if any, and at this point there are none, but he said that should he have someone show interest and have the qualifications that we were looking for, that he would provide that to Living Lord, and then we would consider additional candidate if any should appear. But at this point, we're engaged in additional interviews with the candidate to really check on their qualifications and their interest in Living Lord and what our needs are, and getting to the point of discerning whether this is a candidate to move forward with or not. Like I said, the next thing after these video conferences would be to try to schedule an in-person interview. That's kind of going to impact the timeline moving forward, but that's where we are today. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Barry, for the update. And next on our agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Chad.
Great. Thank you, Jen. I'm going to share a little bit about one of the strategic areas that we've been looking at as staff and as a church. Last year, when we kind of came up with some of the strategies we were going to try to focus on, one of them that came up was focusing on attracting, retaining, engaging young families, young adults in Living Lord as part of our church. And Pastor Lanny had mentioned a study or a program called Growing Young, put out by the Fuller Youth Institute, and I read their book that you see on the screen there, Growing Young: 6 Essential Strategies to Help Young People Discover and Love Your Church. And so I read it and was kind of blown away by what I found. And so I asked another group of people to read and go through a book study on that. And so I'd like to share a little bit about what we gathered from the book and invite other people to read it and see how they could also use some of the things that they're talking about, some of these key commitments in the various ministries that we do have here at Living Lord. So just a couple of background things to consider. Church affiliation from 2007 to 2014 dropped from 78% to 71%. That was in the book. I looked it up. The number in 2019 had dropped even further down to 65%. So only 65% of Americans affiliate themselves as Christian. And that number continues to drop. 18 to 19-year-olds make up 17% of the population in the U.S., but only 10% of the worshiping population. That's kind of national-wide, but we as Wentzville, is one of our key areas that we draw from here at Living Lord, is the fastest growing school district in Missouri, which means we have lots and lots of families and young people in this area, but that has not been reflective in our growth or in having lots of new families be part of our church. So that kind of prompted us to look at what kind of information and things were the Fuller Institute coming up with that led churches to be successful in drawing in, engaging, and supporting young people and young families. So what they did is they did a survey of 259 churches across the country, across denominations, size, all kinds of, there's no key area. They found churches that were successfully engaging people, and they surveyed them, they asked questions, they did interviews, And I want to share two big things that they found out. First, here's the good news. There are 10 myths they found that are kind of circulating about what do churches need to do to attract young people. One, you don't have to be a certain size. You can be a 100-person church, you can be a 5,000-person church. That doesn't matter. That is not something that is going to draw or dissuade young people from coming to your church. You don't need a trendy location. You don't have to have a brand new church. Churches that are 100+ year old are doing this just as well as churches that are popping up designed to attract young people. There is no popular denomination or non-denomination is not a factor in the research they did. Catholic, Episcopal, Lutheran, non-denominational, Methodist, doesn't really matter. That is not one of the determining factors that determines the engagement of young people in the church. You don't have to be off the chart cool with everything you do, which is great for me, because I don't have to be cool then. I can just be me. You do not need a big modern building. While there are a lot of benefits of having certain facilities, they found no real difference in engaging young families based on whether you're being out of a storefront or in a building that's multi-campus. They didn't find a difference. You don't need, and that says a budget, but don't need a big budget in order to be successful in doing this. You don't need a contemporary worship service. They're actually finding in research that a lot of young people are being drawn to more tradition that they knew when they were younger. The liturgical services, the type of music that they grew up with is drawing them back to church. 9, you do not need to have a watered down teaching style. They actually found that generally if you do try to do one of these warm, fuzzy kind of teaching styles to draw kind of people in, to give them that cushy message, that's not what that's not what they want. That is not what they need. They're actually desiring sustenance and something that challenges their faith. And last, you don't need to have a hyper entertaining ministry program to be successful. So those are the things you don't need to have, which is great, because basically they're saying any church can do what they've found these successful churches are doing. So what are they doing? And they came up with this wheel, or these 6 key commitments to growing young. And they found this can work in any context, as long as they are all wrapped around a Jesus-centered community, like we have here at Living Lord. So they have these 6 key elements, and they find, as they talk about these, they're like, these all kind of intertwine and move together, and there is not a best place to start. There's not a worse place to start. They just all kind of feed into them. And so this is what they found, that the churches that are successful in engaging young families and people are doing. 1, and these are, like I said, no particular order, unlock keychain leadership, which essentially boils down to not needing to have a super pastor, but instead you need leadership that is spread out amongst the people. Leadership is nurtured and supported by the church, and people are given the tools and authority to lead ministries. People want to be part of something, and this is even more true in young people. They want to contribute. They don't want to just be served. And so there's a lot of different things that they talk about of how you can work on these within your individual context. 2, empathizing with young people today. We see lots of barbs fired in the media between this generation and that generation, and why are they doing these things? They have found that churches that are successful in engaging young people realize that there is a difference between each generation, and they empathize with what they are going through in their time frame and in their struggle of faith and life. And one of the things, the quote that stood out to me as I read this book was, "We need to first examine how the obstacles of pervasive stress and peripheral faith hijacked their," which is young people's, "ability to define themselves." They are dealing with a lot of factors that were not happening 20, 30, 40 years ago. Even as I look at it in my context of the difference between what the kids are going through today and what I went through in high school is completely different struggles on some levels. So, after empathizing young people today, taking Jesus' message seriously. Young people don't want or need a faith that is essentially just a handbook of moral behavior or is there to make them feel good. They want real discussions, not lectures, of the narrative of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, and the bearing that has on the life that they have today. They want to go into that and see, what does Jesus' message mean for them today in truth, and so that not just hey, do these things and you'll have a good life. They want to have those discussions. They want to wrestle with the scriptures and hear the stories of other people's lives and how Jesus has impacted them. 4, fuel a warm community. It says warm relationships on there, but warm is the new cool for young people. In their interviews that came up, the words that repeatedly came up when young people talked about why they love their church, they used the words like welcoming, belonging, accepted, authentic, hospitable. All these are the words that they mentioned and said, this is why I go to the church I go to. And I think this is one of those areas that is really kind of awesome here at Living Lord, because we do have, as we talked in our small group discussion, we are in a place that does have a warm, welcoming community. Are there things we can do better? Yeah, definitely. But there are some really, really awesome things that happen here that we like to see. Over 33% of the people who were interviewed, and they did thousands of interviews at these different churches, one of the key reasons that they were drawn there, 33% of them said it was the warmth of the church that drew them into being engaged and active in their church. That was higher than any other factor, higher than music, higher than the preaching. It was the warmth of the community. Because young people are desperately desiring a place to call home, to be their tribe. Number 5, prioritizing young people and families everywhere. Essentially, churches that ask themselves how to engage, serve, and support young people and families in everything they do. Churches that fail to do this may be wonderful and even have all the other commitments, but they will eventually grow old. If we're not asking that question of how do we engage young families and people in worship, in Oasis ministry, in this ministry, that ministry, the choir, the music, all those things, if we don't, we may have a wonderful church, but we're not going to be pulling in those young people. Parents, along with that, with the prioritizing young people, parents, from all the research, are the key determining factor in the faith of young people, and the church must support families so that parents can be strong faith formers in their individual families. Without that, everything we do at the church is kind of, it may be wonderful and great, but it will not have the lasting impact that parents have on their families. So we have to find ways to prioritize young families and to help them nurture and grow their young people. And finally, the last commitment they found in all these churches was they were churches that decided to be the best neighbors they could, which really means that churches that grow young are churches that are active in the life of the communities in which they reside. Young peoples want to make a palpable difference in the world and in their community, and the one right where they live is the best place to start. Churches also need to be sure they are helping those in need. And they talk about how they need to be places of acceptance, and that the more diverse a church is, the more likely they will live and survive and thrive, whether that's economically, racially, socially, etc. So those are the 6 commitments, and I think they're all we all look at those and go, well, those all make sense. There's nothing rocket science about any of those. And that's why I really think that we can really work towards that being a place that really focuses on drawing in young families, young people here at Living Lord, and making it a place where we all thrive together. Let me just check to make sure I did everything. We would love to have more groups delve into growing young. Right now, we finished with our initial Bible book study group, finished this. I know the Intergenerational Task Force is talking about starting up and also going through this. We would encourage other groups to read and do a book study on this. We did ours over 4 times. It's really, really fast read. There's a setup chapter with background information, a chapter on each of the commitments, and then a chapter on how to form your own plan. And so I really think that if you have questions or you think this might be something that you would be interested in, please speak with myself or Pastor Lanny or Lewis, and we would be happy to figure out how we can get you involved in the growing young here at Living Lord. In closing, I would like to thank the following people for taking their first steps down this road: Alec Gerke, Karen Henry, Ann and Tim Weeman, Lewis and Pastor Lanny for being part of our initial small book group study. So if you have any questions for me about that, let me know. But I really thank you all for listening a little bit about growing young and how we might be able to use that here at Living Lord.
All right. Thank you, Chad. I really appreciate that. I think we'll go ahead now and open it up for questions. I know one of the questions just on the chat here was regarding whether or not we are going to keep virtual or online worship. And the answer is yes, that is the plan. We would like to continue to provide online fellowship, especially for those who are homebound or, for some reason can't make it physically into the building once it opens up. We feel like everybody has gained so much from being able to still gather and hear the word of God. So yes, the answer is yes, we will continue to do online services. One of the other questions that has come up is regarding, again, when we will go back. Can we offer individual cups and wafers for communion? And the answer to that is yes as well. And we're working through the details on how that will all happen. But right now, that is the plan, to offer those things individually. I think we've had another. I'm going to check the chat. The other questions. How can we get young people involved in our community garden? Chad, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, part of it is just, I know in the past, at different times, we've talked about it, but really just trying to push it forward. I think the key probably to getting young people is to try to get young families for the most part, and build that maybe as family time would probably be one of the key factors in doing that. I can organize times to take youth just as a youth thing, but engaging it as a time for families would probably be our best bet. But we can definitely talk about that with myself, Karen, and Lindsay, and try to figure out ways we can do that if that is something that ministry is interested in doing that. And that goes to any ministry. If any ministry is looking for ways to engage young people, talk to the 3 people on staff, or anybody who's on the Intergenerational Task Force. I think we're looking for ways to engage young people of all ages with other people of the church in all types of ministries.
Great. One of the questions that we had gotten prior to even this morning's session was regarding how can we maintain social distancing once we do reopen the building. And I'll go back to, we're still working through a lot of the details on what opening looks like for Living Lord. We are going to take a phased approach. Of course, similar to what the CDC guidelines are showing from how we can phase in to reopening. So a little more strict in phase 1, and then from there, phase 2 a little less, and then phase 3, and then to finally being as we were before. But we will be looking at ways to safely social distance, especially in the first phase. So we're still fleshing out the details, but we will share as everything has come together. Okay, let me see if we've got any other chats. I don't see any other questions. So Barry, I know we had another question prior to our session this morning, and it was, how will the pandemic affect the call process? I know you kind of went through it a little bit already, but it sounds like right now we're going to have to, we're slowing down, and we'll do the video interviewing, but as soon as things are more open to doing something in person, you plan to do something in person, correct?
Correct. Yeah. In the normal flow of events, we probably would get to a point sooner to do an in-person interview and then start working, you know, if that's the preferred candidate, start working as, you know, bringing the candidate into Living Lord and seeing, you know, the facilities, the area, the, you know, that type of thing. But with travel restrictions and stuff in our area, and then even as they start opening up, it's probably going to take longer to get to the point of having those in-person meetings with the candidate and getting a candidate of choice to present to the council.
Thank you. Another question that we had prior was, how are we keeping our finances strong? And I'm just going to reiterate what I presented regarding, you know, we're really watching our expenditures right now. Every ministry group is going back through and scrubbing where we can hold off spending. We also, in the statements, in the first quarter statement sent out to everybody, gave ways to be able to give. That doesn't involve being physically in the church. You can mail your check, you can give online, through your bank, or through any like PayPal or any of the other online offerings. We are also working hard at you know, focusing on the cash flow. So doing the PPP loan and the Thrivent offering to do interest-only payments. So making a lot of actions right now to assure that we have strong finances going into the summer. And let me see if there's any other questions anybody's put in. We do have one concerning, I don't know if Pastor Lanny, if he's able to chime in or not, or if he's on mute. But one of the questions was, will Pastor Lanny be able to stay with us through the rest of the call process since things have slowed down? We do have a agreement, a contract with Pastor Lanny for 1 year, which would be up toward the 1st of September. So right now, yes, we're hoping that through the summer we can wrap up the call process. So trying to look into the crystal ball is a little bit hard, but we have asked him to be here for a year total, and he started back in September. All right, let me see if anything else has come up. Grab the chat. Okay, one more question. What factors are going to drive the reopening of the church for services? And really, it gets down to what is the state and county and health department saying regarding when we could safely begin having in-person services. So we're monitoring all the guidelines that they are presenting. So it's watching daily what has come out from those 3 different areas to see when it would be good timing for us to begin. But it comes right back down to it is really our choice regarding when we are comfortable. So once the guidelines say we could begin services in person with maximum social distancing, we still want to make sure we're protecting our vulnerable and keeping everyone safe and opening back up when the time is right for living Lord. Okay, one more check. If I can get it up. Okay, my chat window isn't opening, so I don't know if there's anything else out there.
What about doing parking lot services?
We have not talked through that detail, that idea. We've seen that other synods have mentioned it in some of the guidelines they've put out, but that could be a possibility in the plans. Again, we're still fleshing out a lot of details, but it could be something we could consider. Okay, let me see if I can get this chat window opened. There we go. Okay, the last question I've seen is, do we have a large number of people who have lost their jobs? And at that point, does anybody need additional help for those who are unemployed? I would not say we've had a large number, but we have had families who have been impacted by unemployment or reduced hours. And we are staying in touch with them through our member care calls. And right now, at this point, we have not heard of anyone needing any additional assistance, but we are keeping them on those families on our prayer list. And if the need does arise, though, that we will make sure that we are able to help and support them through this time.
We've also received a list of people who, we're maintaining a list at the church of people who have offered to help other people in case they do need assistance. So I know Leslie has that list at the office. If there are people who do need assistance, we do have other people in the church who've made offers to assist. So reach out either way.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, any other questions from anyone? Well, and just know anybody can reach out anytime to call the church office, to call myself, to call anybody on the council, to Debbie. of course, Lewis and Pastor Lanny. So reach out if you know someone who does need some help. Reach out if you need help or have a question regarding anything concerning the pandemic or the call process. We definitely want to keep everyone informed the best we can. Keep reading your newsletters, keep reading your eSun Times. We will keep updating everyone in those two ways of communicating, as well as on Facebook. So please, but don't hesitate to reach out if you do have a question or want clarification on anything. So with that, I am going to go ahead and close our meeting in prayer if there isn't anything else. Okay. All right, please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for gathering your faithful servants this morning and for giving us the means and technology to be able to be together in this way. Please guide our plans during this pandemic and help us as we continue through the call process. Please show us how we can gather all of your sheep, including our youth and young families. Again, thank you for gathering all of us together today. We ask you to keep us safe, to help us to lean on you during these uncertain times. We trust in you and your guidance through all of these things. In your name, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. It was so good to see everybody. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Hallelujah.
Thank you.